Welcome to 129 The Kiss, Konstantin Brancusi. This is actually his fourth edition of The Kiss. He created four pieces of this sculpture that we're going to look at. So the original was created between 1907 and 1908. This is limestone or stone. You can have that either way. Okay. So this piece is located in the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And Brancusi was really an artist who redefined sculpture in the modern age. Okay. So before we look at Brancusi, one of the last sculpturists that we looked at was Auguste Rodin. Okay. And Rodin, who did the Burghers of Calais, was a more modern sculptor, but he kind of created pieces that were a little bit rougher. And Brancusi actually studied under Rodin in his studio for a short time before really going off on his own and making his own name. One of the biggest things with Brancusi to understand is that he's really redefining what sculpture is in the modern age. He broke that 19th century narrative tradition that Rodin had created. Okay, so he was really an outsider to modernism. Okay, he was Romanian, and he learned a lot of his craft in Romania, and eventually made his way to Paris, as all the major artists did of this time period, because Paris was kind of like the Mecca for the salons of all great artists in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. Well, 18th and 19th centuries mainly. Okay. So if we look at Brancusi's work, he is really making more primitive works. Okay, so he's bringing this total primitive viewpoint to Paris instead of learning in Paris and taking it elsewhere. We can tell that he is working with his Romanian tradition of stone carving and wood carving, kind of like folk art might be, which was a big thing in Romania. Okay. So he's bringing those tools of that tradition that he learned kind of into Paris. He was regarded for one of his main focuses in creating this type of work was to truly look at nature, the nature of an object, and finding the internal spirit, finding its real structure. So if you look at this piece, it is very square. Okay. So it looks like a block of limestone. He is using the original nature of the stone to create figures within the stone. Okay. So he's really showcasing the original thought of what a stone is. Okay. He's not really changing that outward formation much. It's like I said, it is limestone. It's block-like, simple. Some people think that this could be almost like a child could create it. Okay, and that's going to be kind of a theme of more modern art, more avant-garde type of pieces. And we've talked about avant-garde before, which avant-garde is basically anything new, things that are different, out of the norm. They're avant-garde. Okay, so Brancusi had an attempt to retain its materiality. So it came from a stone, so it still looks like a stone. Okay, he's retaining that material aspect of what he is actually working with. Okay, we dissect this piece, we see that there are two people. Okay, their arms are clasped around each other, only bending where their elbows might be. So it's a kind of a natural bend of where your arm would go around somebody. Again, very simple. The elbows aligned at the corner of the block, continuing into clasped hands behind each other's backs. They are separated only by an incised line in the middle. Um, on the right side, we read that as a woman, and the left side we read as a man. The reason we read that as a woman is because there is a arched line, almost giving us a definition of a breast, and the longer hair as well. The eyes create almost like a cyclops feel with their lips, and because the eyes go together and almost make one eye, their lips also together. The piece reveals the structure of the limestone, which and then there's simplified carving of hair. The woman's hair is longer, but really it's signifying this kind of union of these two figures. It's very primitive, very truthful. It speaks to kind of the human condition. And when we say primitive, we think of very rough like pieces. Think of the Venus of Willendorf. You all know that's my favorite piece. But it's very primitive. It's very non, oh gosh, it's very non-refined. Okay. It's a rough, raw surface. And the piece itself was a very radical sculpture for the time. It was not technical. You have to think of at the time, I mean, again, people are looking at Auguste Rodin's pieces, and then you come up with this. Like it was a shocking, radical movement in the art world. It was Brancusi was one that rejected the sophistication of a sculpture in order to show the truth in nature. This shows truth in nature because of the materials that it uses. Okay, so again, that's the biggest key takeaway from this piece is that type of primitive truth in nature takeaway, where the sophistication was really rejected, and in favor of nature and finding that kind of internal spirit of the actual structure. So here we have 129, the kiss. Next up. All right, Portuguese music for that one. 130, The Portuguese by George Brock, 1911 CE. This is oil on canvas. And George Brock is going to be a slightly familiar name because I did talk about him a little bit when I was talking about Pablo Picasso. Because later in Picasso's career, him and Brock really collaborated, and they did a lot of very similar works of art in their analytical cubist movement. Okay, so in the tradition of Pablo Picasso and the way he created cubism and the way he formed his specific works of art, you can see here that this is a Portuguese man, okay, playing an instrument. In the middle, you can kind of see an outline of an eye, nose, and mouth. But again, that analytical cubism is going to kind of break those pieces together. Remember, this is kind of almost like a collage in the way that this piece is, it's almost like a puzzle. If you think of a puzzle and you put the whole puzzle together and it looks completely done, and then you take it apart and you take the puzzle pieces and you put them all in different spots, that's almost like what this is being created. If you were to dissect this and put all the puzzle pieces in the right spot, you would come up with a figure, okay? But because of the way that it's formed, this kind of cubist nature, it defines things into these basic shapes and rearranges them to almost make it more of a dynamic look. So he's dissecting works of art, okay? So, and here's a key word here, fractured. So he was fracturing his works of art. In this canvas, everything was fractured. The guitar player and the dock was just so many pieces of broken form, almost broken glass. By breaking these objects into smaller elements, Braque and Picasso are able to overcome the unified singularity of an object and instead transform it into an object of vision. George Braque was at the forefront of the revolutionary art movement of Cubism. Braque's work throughout his life focused on still lifes and means of viewing objects from various perspectives through color, line, and texture. While his collaboration with Pablo Picasso and their Cubist works are best known, Braque had a long painting career that continued beyond Cubism. Braque was also often dedicated to quiet periods in his studio rather than being a personality in the art world. Picasso was much more of a big personality in the art world than Braque. He began developing a Cubist style after meeting Pablo Picasso. While their paintings shared many similarities in palette, style, and subject matter, Braque stated that unlike Picasso, his work was, quote, devoid of iconological commentary, and was concerned purely with pictorial space and composition. Braque sought balance and harmony in his compositions, especially through paper cols, a pasted paper collage technique that Picasso and Braque invented in 1912. Braque, however, took collage one step further by gluing cut-up advertisements into his canvases, thus foreshadowing modern art movements concerned with critiquing media such as pop art. So here, with Braque, we have the beginnings of this collage pop art type movement. And pop art is really concerned with kind of the Americana and the world that surrounds it in a very media influenced and, oh my gosh, what's the word? Media influenced and like when you're buying things, retail kind of world, okay? So again, you see this analytical cubism as you're fracturing these objects and really breaking them up into different portions so that it was a pictorial space and composition. Like that's purely what we have here. This is also going to really, Picasso and Braque are really going to pave the way into this modern art movement with Cubism, okay? This abstract kind of expressionism. Braque stenciled letters onto paintings, blended pigments with sand, and copied wood grain and marble to achieve great levels of dimension in his paintings. His depictions of still lifes are so abstract that they border on becoming patterns that express an essence of the object viewed rather than the direct representation. So again, the keyword essence. He is creating the essence of an object, okay? So not really showing an actual object, an actual still life, but an essence of what was, okay? So if we look at the Portuguese man, we can see this, okay? The essence of someone, something, but fractured so much that it's really concerned with movement, with line, with balance in the way that it was created, okay? You can also see letters and things that help to kind of flow your eye around the actual piece.